Remember all those container ships in an ocean traffic jam off the ports of LA and Long Beach waiting to be unloaded? That bottleneck is easing, but alas, the world's supply chain problems remain. For instance, rising COVID cases in China have shut down factories there. Well, to make the U.S. economy more resilient to supply chain problems, the White House this week announced a new data sharing initiative with a nifty acronym. FLOW stands for Freight Logistics Optimization Works. And to tell us about it, we have the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, on the line. Mr. Secretary, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
So let's talk about this FLOW program. I'm waiting for a package and I have this tracking number, which makes me think, boy, this shipping system is full of transparency, but in reality, not so much.
Yeah, when you get to the container level, it turns out that the data sharing is not the way you might assume. We've been working these supply chain issues from the beginning of the administration. We've been working on everything from physical infrastructure in ports to 24/7 operations. But one issue that we've been hearing about again and again from the different players who are involved, the shippers, the terminal operators, the ports themselves, is this issue of data sharing. Because there are so many different players, mostly private sector companies who are involved in getting a given package or item.
And players that often don't talk to one another?
Yeah, and a lot of times, for business reasons, they felt they need to hold tight onto this data. But it turns out there's a lot of data that is not a trade secret that could be shared. Things like, knowing when containers are actually ready at a warehouse for pickup so that drivers don't have to waste their time kind of standing by at a port gate. Or even if you just look at these big stacks that you see on TV, or if you live near a port, something as simple as, knowing whether the container that is in the middle of the stack needs to be picked up sooner than one that's on top of it. Sounds like basic stuff, but it doesn't always get shared.
Yeah.
We're changing that on a voluntary basis, working with some of these different private sector players.
Okay, so, we're in the information business. Certainly, the more data, the more information, the better. But then there are all these supply chain bottlenecks kind of upstream from America, right? Chinese ports shut down, Chinese factories idled because of COVID, protectionism from certain countries that don't want to export, say, a key metal. What do you do about that? How do you plan to address those forces, which seem to be, out of the U.S. government's control?
Well, it's one of the reasons you hear us talking a lot about Buy America, Made in America. We're always going to trade with different partners around the world, but I think it's clearer and clearer that we become too dependent on some of the ups and downs of what can be happening half a world away. And when the parts you really need to make something in America are sitting on a boat in China or not even able to get on the boat in China, that is going to be an issue no matter how good we are here on the U.S. side. It's why we have a real focus on boosting U.S. manufacturing, whether we're talking about the auto industry or especially some of the other opportunities we're creating with the infrastructure bill. When we're going to be buying a lot of buses, rail cars, train sets, those kinds of things for our infrastructure, the more that's made in America, the more we can build up an industry that is sourced a little closer to home and less vulnerable to these global shocks.
Well, I want to ask about this infrastructure bill, now, of course, signed into law by the president. You push for funds to be spent on mass transit rather than roads. But in states like Texas, this is being steered to expand highways. Anything you can do to ensure the infrastructure money is actually going to be used to slow climate change, or is this just a reality of our federalist system?
Well, we're finding that there is a lot of enthusiasm for transit, especially at the local level. As a matter of fact, I was in Texas this week, saw the vision that they have in Austin, for example, where the community took the extraordinary step of voting for themselves to have to pay just a little more in terms of taxes to support a $7 billion transit build-out that's going to strengthen the economy, improve affordability, and ways for people to get around there. Of course, highways are always going to be an important part of our transportation system for the foreseeable future, but we are asking states to look at the big picture, to consider restoring and repairing what they have and not automatically assume that expansion is the right answer, and to make sure that there are alternatives, active transportation, easier ways to get around a neighborhood, good transit, as well as making sure that if you are driving a car on the road, that we make that cleaner through things like the turn toward electric vehicles that we're working very hard to support with things like a national network of EV chargers that's going to make it much easier to make that choice to adopt an EV.
The fact is, though, that governors have a fair amount of say over how this money is spent, yeah?
That's right. A lot of our dollars go out by formula, and those decisions are made at the state level, something that's important for residents and citizens to think about if they care about how their transportation future is shaped. But a lot of these decisions are also made at the local level, and we've structured a lot of the programs in this bill so that in addition to the dollars that go out through formula to the states, there are also opportunities for cities, towns, counties, and local transit agencies to come straight to our door at the U.S. Department and bring good ideas that we're going to fund as many as we can.
And I want to ask you about traffic. The U.S., as you know, is seeing a spike in pedestrian deaths and traffic deaths in the pandemic, highest increase in car fatalities in nearly half a century. And the numbers are horrific. It's speeding, it's intoxication, it's seatbelts. Anything your department can do?
We're very focused on this. Matter of fact, we just put out a national roadway safety strategy on this issue because the level of death and destruction on our roads is unacceptable. We can talk about the need for safer vehicles, safer driving, safer speeds, better post-crash care as well. But I think the number one thing we need is a culture change. We as a country have come to just sort of accept that there are going to be 38,000 deaths on our roadways, like it's a fact of life, like it's inevitable. It's not inevitable. We see cities and communities around the country and around the world that have done much, much better than that have embraced a vision of moving towards zero and taken some of the necessary steps to help get us there. It used to be considered that, you could never get to a year of zero deaths in commercial aviation, but that happens fairly often in the U.S. right now. We would be up in arms if 40,000 people were killed a year on our subways or trains or in our skies. We shouldn't accept that on our roadways either.
Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation. Mr. Secretary, thank you again for the time.
Thank you. Good to be with you.